Okay. Good morning, Greg. How are you on this Friday morning that we're recording this?
I have listed my name as Vesuvius for this episode because sadly my bathroom is Pompeii. I'm still not feeling well, Brian. We had one hell of a trip, and the fallout, literally and figuratively, from that trip is still kicking my ass. We've been on the road for 2.5 months. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? On and off
yeah,
to different venues. And
yes,
finally, it caught up to the big guy.
finally did.
Shelly said this week, she goes, "You got that Stephen King thinner thing," she said, because it's not good. So,
This
yeah,
entire week, I have slept until this thing called an alarm has gone off, Greg. I actually
never used one
I
in my life, wouldn't
actually
know,
have
right?
been sleeping, and then yeah, I had the same stomach issue that cleared up for me a few days ago. But all good. I mean, it was bound to happen with how much we were traveling.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so everyone listening right now, we got a great episode today.
I agree.
We think it's gonna be great. We hope you all think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, you may choose to tune out now. We're still going to talk.
So today, a big picture. What we're talking about is, airplanes, First Amendment, comedians, university professors, and a litany of other topics, so to speak, but all
Yeah,
under, anyone who's been listening to us knows we talk about behavior, and we talk about intent, and we don't care what your motive is or motivations, your ideology. We stay out of that stuff. We let all
yep.
the pundits that suck it but get paid a lot of money talk about that stuff. That's fine for them to do. Doesn't really go anywhere, but hey, it's entertaining. um we don't get into that, and anyone listening has heard us use the term before that most people want their say, not their way. However, we think it is important to kind of discuss how words, speech, the way people talk influence people's behavior, and what the meaning is sometimes behind it. You get a lot of people say, well, you can't say this, or yeah, you can say that, and a lot of times they're wrong, just without a good understanding of the First Amendment. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and what some of those elements mean, and what you can and can't do. Some of that's changed now, I think, Greg, because well, it hasn't. The law hasn't changed. The mediums have changed versus, a town hall
Yep.
is Twitter a town hall now? Is social media? Is it because you get it instantly and there's this
Yep.
dialogue? So that's the complex part of this. But case law and stare decisis is what it is in the Supreme Court. Like you go
Good
back,
use, my dear friend.
yeah,
Good use.
so what
That made me smile, Brian.
what
Great job.
legal precedent is important, and so you
It's
can go
hugely
back to that
important.
and go, well, this is what that means. It's what the Supreme Court justice or any court's job is to do, is to interpret that based on the today's situation that's in front of them, right? So
Yep.
kind of we're sort of doing that same thing, talking about some events that have occurred using the kind of the legal standard, but also talking about what does that mean today? How does that influence behavior? Because some
Yep.
people can get away with saying things that other people can't, and a
Yep.
lot of people don't like that, but it's important to distinguish that there are different standards based on things like the location you're in, when you talk about it,
Exactly.
the time, the venue, the intent, who you are as an individual, what your role is in society. All of
Absolutely.
those things matter. So that's big picture. Took me a couple minutes to get through just what we're
No.
preface what we're talking about today. So I'll throw it to you to start, Greg, because this came again, our car conversations,
Yep.
or phone call conversations before we're talking to a client or something, where we kind of bat this stuff around, or text message thread where we go back and forth, and I go, no, you can't say that. They go, yeah, but Brian. So
The true left of Greg. It
yeah,
is. It's a true
yeah,
argument. And folks, if you could have seen the text chain on that one, because we were in the green room for another gig, and Brian, you and I were pretty vicious on that one, only
yeah.
based on the fact that I was not taking a personal opinion approach. I was taking a legal precedent approach, and you know how
And then
sometimes
I took I took
I you did.
the other side and said, well, hang on,
Yep.
that takes a lot to string those things together and
I
to
got it.
come
But
to a
what do
judgment.
attorneys do? What do
No,
attorneys
no,
do?
and that's exactly what
Exactly.
we were kind of
So,
doing. That we were playing like kind
yep.
of offense, defense,
Yep.
prosecution, defense,
But
however you want
but
to talk
Brian,
about
wouldn't you agree that those type of tabletops, those type of texts, those type of conversations are truly essential to fully exploring an issue?
it.
And let
Yes.
me give you a brief example. Okay, and we can deep dive, but let's talk about the gosh damn Dave Chapelle thing that comes out, New York
Okay.
Comedy Club. Okay.
So everyone listening, that was Dave Chappelle's doing a comedy set, doing an act, and the guy got up out of the crowd, rushed him, knocked him over. He learned a lot. The security there tried to teach him a lesson. I saw some of the photos of him coming out of it. It did not look well. But he also, it's important to understand, he also had on him a knife. It was weird because it was like a gun that like I think you probably pull the trigger and a knife comes out the front. It's some weird thing, but either way, it's a deadly weapon.
Well, let's talk about that.
But it's important just to set up the circumstances. So
suspect is Isaiah Lee. Okay. Suspect had on him a weapon, or what could be construed as a weapon, but it must not have been brandished, and it must not have been the type of assault we're thinking, because the DA's office says, hey, it's only a misdemeanor assault. That's an important standard.
He didn't use that in the assault.
Right. So let's talk, though, about what America does and what the world does sometimes very quickly. So the minute Chappelle's attack came out, you can't go on any social media site. I wouldn't know. I'm not on them, but I mean, I hear, and I'm not stupid. Yeah. But it goes right back to Will Smith. The Will Smith slapping Chris Rock incident in March. Now, here's my thing. When you take a look at the two, the only connective fiber is a great comment against the LADA and for sanity, where the owner of the comedy club, which is a chain of comedy clubs that a lot of people appear at, said Will Smith got an Oscar after he slapped Chris Rock, and now this. LA residents deserve to live there in LA violence free. Well, first of all, that's a platitude, because we know that that's not happening. Second of all, let's not conflate a slap or a misdemeanor assault with the blatant robberies, homicides, and all that other stuff that's going on. And it's not just LA folks. Okay.
Yeah.
But my thing is this unreasonable jump to connect things and say the Will Smith incident is why all this is coming out. Now, I'm not a scholar, Brian, by any stretch of the imagination, but I think back, wasn't Bob Marley shot while he was on stage? Or am I way off on this one?
Dimebag Darrell from Pantera.
Yeah, you see what I'm trying to say? So do we need to go back? Now, look, I would tell you that if we just took a minute and paused the call or the Zoom and went off and search, we could find that. Did anybody do any due diligence on this? Did anybody take a look at these capers and say, hey, precedent has been set in other ways? No. So that's my first argument is shut the F up unless you take a look at the big picture. Second thing was, okay, I would argue, and this is where we're going to fight, I would argue that while a comedy club is where you go to get insulted, so you better have a thicker skin, I would also claim that certain words are fighting words.
Yes.
So you got to be prepared that if you go in there and you start launching a diatribe about something, it may reach the threshold of violence. That's all I'm saying. That's
there are what the Supreme Court has classified as fighting words, and because I want to make sure I had some of the definitions on this, so it's not just me, explaining it, but it's similar to what falls under kind of incitement. But it said fighting words are not protected by First Amendment. Fighting words means words which would likely make the person to whom they are addressed commit an act of violence. Now that goes back to the Chaplinsky case, where it's an altercation with a police officer. He shouted, "You're a goddamn racketeer and a damn fascist." So the idea is the very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. But
immediate lawless action is what I like to take away from
and that where incitement comes in. But that I would say almost like incitement is the opposite side of the same coin, so incitement is me, I'm getting you riled up, Greg, to go commit violence on someone else. But like the fighting words is me talking to you, Greg, and you get so angry that you come after me. But I go back to what the venue was of a comedy place, like that. The whole point is they're making joke, like that is the whole entire thing. I think people do this all the time when they're like, oh, that comedian, they've had the craziest life, listen to all their stuff. And I'm like, those are jokes. And they're like, yeah, but like, I was like, that story likely never happened. It's a joke and it's hilarious. But but they're
They
an actor, they're a
crafted that.
comedian.
They crafted that.
And over
They
time,
wrote that over
especially
time to see
Chappelle.
the reaction.
Chappelle's like at the
Exactly.
highest level of the game.
One of my absolute favorite.
So how long did it take for
comedians
him to
of all
make
time.
those jokes? It wasn't
Yep.
an off the cuff comment.
Yep.
It wasn't during the interview afterwards where he just said something funny or something.
It wasn't at dinner.
It was
a
an
public
act.
venue.
It's called
overheard.
a bit. It's called an
I get
act.
it.
You in the audience. There's a reasonable person would understand that you sitting in the audience. That's what you're there. That's likely going to happen in a comedy act. It wasn't like the example of what's his name. Remember the guy from Seinfeld, Kramer, who in the middle of his
balcony,
bit. Well, no,
he has a heckler. Right.
But yeah. So in the middle of his bit, he gets heckled. And he changes his act and starts dropping F-bombs and N-words.
He stepped out of his act.
Yes. So that would be now if something happened there, that would be different because it wasn't part of it. So
even though the venue is identical. So Brian, I would add this, and I've got a prop today. I don't often have props.
Oh, you have a prop.
But here is my prop today.
That's
now, you know what the remote allows us to do? There's
Change
a little
the channel.
button. You've got it. And so as long as you have, now, what is this? Folks, if you're listening or watching, this is gosh damn de-escalation 101. Okay. If you have the chance to get up and walk out because you're offended by the speech, Brian, if you have the chance to change the channel or turn down the volume, then that's a form of de-escalation.
So you have the right to do that. So did Will Smith. And it violates probably the customs, courtesies, and protocols of the club if you were to stand up and yell something back. But at least I understand that. There's a point because now they're just gonna go, hey, you got to go. That violates our policies here. But you go back to the Will Smith. If he had stood up and said, hey, MFer, shut the F up when you're talking about this, like that situation would have been completed. Is that inappropriate? Yeah, because again, it's a bit. But can you come back from that? Can you have a dialogue?
Yes.
Did Chris Rock say right there, like, hey, man, it's a joke. I get you. Let's talk afterwards. I'm in the middle of an act here. There's people watching on television. Like, you can walk that back. You can have a conversation. What you're not allowed to do is walk up and slap a man in the face for it. Like that.
Precisely. So let's go. Like the face of a clock. So you just went from noon to midnight, and that's perfect. So let's go. Boom, one tick right at midnight. If Isaiah Lee was arrested for jumping up on the stage and assaulting Dave Chapelle, then Will Smith, because it has nothing to do with anything, should have been arrested for a misdemeanor assault for jumping up on the stage and assaulting Chris Rock. Here's the problem. We think because there's somebody else, here we go with an inflated status because of a person's ego or self-image or his public image or his social image.
Influence.
But you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Here's the thing. There's a societal standard for right and good. And there's also the legal standard. You know how much I love the law. But here's the thing that really bothered me. So later when Will Smith wins the Oscar, okay, and by the way, it was for the Venus and Serena Williams film. He does the dad role that's in a film. I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it. Incredible.
And
he's an amazing actor. He's an amazing actor.
I mean, I watch iRobot every time it comes on.
Independence Day is one of the classics.
We saw Independence Day in Colombia in Spanish, if you remember that.
Oh, that's right. It was on.
In the hotel room. It was on a continuous loop. So, but the idea is that when he got up, he apologized to the Academy, and I understand that he apologized to the Academy. He also apologized to other nominees. Brian, that doesn't go far enough.
Nope.
Okay, here's the thing. I don't care where you felt you were. He should have apologized to Chris Rock for his behavior, should apologize to the American people, and he should have walked off the stage and turned himself in so the prosecutor could have given him a personal bond. This isn't a case where he needed to be bonded out with $1 million bail, surety.
Right.
Should have done it. I would have applauded him. I would have stood up and said that, he went too far and now he reined it in.
And I think the investigation will show. I know there was people that were trying to make that happen during that show. Like, he's got to go. He's got to get arrested. We're calling the police. And then no one did it.
I bet it was even some of his own party. That were like, okay, we saw this ramp up. We got to get him out of here.
And he should not have been allowed to continue this. He should have been escorted. At a minimum, you got to go right now. Right now, you're gone. Yeah, we'll figure this out later, but you're gone. We're in the middle of something right now, and you did something so wildly inappropriate and illegal, broke the law.
Live television. So listen, this is the same argument, and I don't want to start things because it'll be a future episode. Same argument. I'm sorry, I'm still sick. Same argument about the gosh damn SCOTUS leak. Okay, you can't create a duplicitous standard.
Right.
If the information that you're putting out there is likely to incite imminent lawless action, and it did. and it's going to, then your behavior needs to be reined in and it needs to be regulated. So that's a hard argument, Brian. But it's
so here's the,
people need to talk about.
That's one of the situations that involve a little bit more complexity. Did someone
Yes.
break the law, or did they just to break a policy or something what they were supposed to do?
Right.
That would be a whole separate episode. But I kind of want to get back on with what we were going, because that we could literally do that for an hour of everything.
Again, that's a
why
future...
I brought up stare decisis, but I don't know. That's supposed to be an important principle. What everyone will do is say, well, now because Will Smith did that, it's now people are going to feel it acceptable. And you brought up a great comment a few minutes ago where you said, well, but those things have always happened. And always. They are, but this is what we do.
Hey,
what
remember that time back in the Roman Senate?
Yeah. I think there was an issue during that. Yeah.
They objected, Brian.
They objected in a violent manner.
Yeah, they came right up on stage.
So the idea is what a lot of times what we do as humans is we go, okay, what happened here? And then everyone takes this historical approach, but they only go as far as they want and go, oh, here. Everyone picks a point and goes, well, here, see, when this happened, you know what? Everything changed, and this is what not caused it, but because we allowed this to happen, or because there was something occurred here, that now normalized that behavior. It's like you can go back for how many times if someone come up on stage, how many comedians have someone come up on stage to try and like get in their face or call them out or heckle them or knock them over or hit like
it happened last night. It'll happen tonight.
Wasn't that Colombia where years ago where the goalie let up the goal and they lost the World Cup and someone executed him in the street? I mean,
it's a homicide. You're exactly right, Brian. So it's not unprecedented. This is not the first incident. It's just more notorious. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And I don't want to bring up notorious, but my good friend Biggie Smalls, he got gunned down. Yeah. Okay, his stage was the street where he started. Take a look at Tupac. Tupac was gunned down. His stage was the street. We don't know the outcomes of those, but it's a rub. People said words. Those words led to the imminent lawless action, which was in those instances a homicide.
So this is
Brian, that's unscripted. That's just me popping into my head with this fever.
And this is what's not protected under the First Amendment. No. Something what's called incitement. Let me just define that as being that you said it right there. But what the Supreme Court said is basically that it's not protected and it's considered incitement if the words that you're saying or if they're likely to cause and intended to cause imminent lawless action. And that's important. So if I'm talking to a group of people, I said, hey, tomorrow we're going to go take this city hall down and we're going to stand up. It's like, okay. And that would be protected speech because it's not really imminent. Now, my intent is maybe lawless action, but it has to meet these criteria. And each case is a little bit different.
But
right?
Let's draw that back too, Brian, and say, we're in a Wavy Gravy's taco stand line, and you bump into me and spill lemonade on me, and I turn around and I go, I swear to God, and you go, hey, come get some, and then we're fighting. Those types of things. If I incite you with the right word at the right time, every one of us has a personal trigger. An argument can be made.
Those can be made for fighting words. Yeah,
exactly.
On that one. And this each case has to be kind of decided, independently.
But that goes directly to the central point that you're making. So let's take those words from the stage and let's go 35,000 feet above the stage.
Okay.
And now let's be sitting in coach where we are, the 46F, Brian. So every time the guy opens the shitter door, it smacks you in the forehead and wakes you up, right? And the person next to you just can't shut the F up. And so you hit your flight attendant button. The flight attendant comes over.
I've done this before.
He starts that thing. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
Now, listen, that escalation of just invoking the need for a flight attendant to intervene at airline, 30,000 foot on a federally regulated industry, Brian, you're committing a crime with your words, and you're not allowed to act in a specific manner. But what's happened when we've cheapened the act of flying for business or pleasure? What's happened when we have allowed alcohol to run unchecked through those situations? Brian, okay, so Orville and Wilbur didn't have to contend with passengers. You get what I'm trying to say? But ever since there's been passengers, I'm sure there's been unruly passengers. But why now? Because people forget that a location, okay, is specifically important to where an incident is going to be judged. And at the airport, you can't say bomb, okay?
Right.
But you can get away with saying go fuck yourself, okay? But you start saying that on an airplane, Brian, when that
Right.
airplane is in flight, now you've got a completely different situation.
Right. So the environment and in the venue will change the meaning and the significance of what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And that's important to understand. Like again, even with if you took exactly what Dave Chapelle was saying and you put it at someone on an airplane saying that,
Yep.
pissing off some people around them, that's completely different. That's absolutely completely different
Yep.
than a comedian on stage. And it's important to make these distinctions. Now it's still what people are going to do, because the reason why we're bringing some of these examples up, and there's other ones that we will talk about, is if there's enough of that communication of someone saying something over and over again, will that cause someone to go commit an illegal act? Right.
Yeah,
So like,
and remember
Greg,
what an illegal act, and assault is an illegal act. I mean,
right.
we're thinking like riot. We're not
No,
talking
no,
about
no,
that,
no.
folks. Right.
No, it doesn't have to be
Right.
something like that. It
Nope.
can be something as simple as, a simple
Well,
misdemeanor
and your
assault.
comment,
I mean,
your comment. Let's take the same one that we took from the stage, went up to the plane, and Brian, let's do it. We're at your daughter's wedding.
right.
Protracted in the future, 15 years. We're at your daughter's wedding, and Chapelle happens to be in the audience and stands up and starts off on his trans thing with a person that's attending the wedding. A completely different dynamic.
Yes.
You see what I'm trying to say? So the outcomes of that venue at that time and at that place matter, and that's what we're trying to make sure that we keep in that central corridor.
It could be. And what it's doing too is there's limits to free speech, because words have meaning and you are responsible for what you say. Now, again, when it comes to responsibility, that changes based on who you are, based on the location, based on the intent behind the meaning.
Well, give me an example of that. Give me an example about who you are.
This is what gets into the big arguments about Twitter and about a lot of social media, right? Because they're private companies own that. They can they have the right to say, we don't like what you're saying, you can't come on here.
Kick you off.
They absolutely do. And no one reads their end user license agreement. No one actually reads all the fine print when you sign up for those things, but you assign to that, and there's a standards of conduct, and there's things that say, hey, you will not do this, you will not do that. And guess what? The company who owns that, who's letting you use that for free, they get to say what comes and goes. And that's clear. There is no argument on that one. Now, what people are trying to say is like, is Twitter the new town hall? And that's a valid point, I think, philosophically, or you know what I mean?
Like, I would agree there. I would agree philosophically,
because
not
it's
legally.
not legally at all whatsoever.
Nope,
so if you want to go start
definition.
passing more laws, which I'm generally, anytime someone says, they should make a law that says, I just immediately forget whatever comes after that.
And then horrible. Right?
That's what you want. More laws on the books. There you go.
You're right.
But the idea is what people say has different meaning. So with me, Brian, on there, who's hardly ever on Twitter and has almost no followers, I say something, the effect of my words aren't going to go very far. But if you're someone very, very popular on there, what you say influences people's actions. It directly influences their behavior and their actions.
I absolutely agree.
So here's the thing. Although you can be on there, like, you don't really have a responsibility. I wish people felt that they had a responsibility when they have an audience, but a lot of people really don't. But it changes. So if you're Elon Musk, who just bought up a large percentage of Twitter, and you can say whatever on there, but then people go, well, hey, you shouldn't be able to say some of these things because you're influencing other people. But he doesn't. He can. Like, that's the thing. Now, does that change if you're a politician? Because you have a responsibility to the people who elected you. Precisely. And to all the people in the United States, not just your constituents who elected you.
What about a teacher?
You can say, okay, that's
what about, because your kid goes to school at a public school and you're not there every day,
and they directly influence that child's behavior. They definitely influence their actions, the way they think, the way they treat others. That's a direct one-on-one, far more direct than a Twitter comment, right? A shout
or an airport comment.
A shout into the void of social media, or a group of people, or a group of adults, or on an airplane. Like, now that completely changes. So this is where the complexity comes in, Greg, and they have, the the Supreme Court has defined these different terms about, what incitement is, what
Yep.
fighting words are, what obscenity is, defamation, there's commercial speech, there's a whole bunch of different
Slander,
types.
perjury, every one of those is a protected speech category. You're
And
exactly right.
so you technically can go on the news and start spouting off anything you want. They could be complete lies. You can make stuff up. And if you're careful, you kind of won't really get reined in or get in trouble for it. Meaning, if I keep it general enough about maybe a large group of people, that might be free speech, protected by free speech. But now if I make up a bunch of stuff specifically, if I go on the news and make up, say, Greg Williams, I've seen him rob 16 liquor stores and kill 3 people, and he did this and he did that.
You said you were going to keep that quiet, Brian.
It's out there in the void now.
Bastard, thanks.
If it happens in a different country, is it still illegal? No. But the idea is that that's different. I can't go on there and say those, like, meaning you have recourse on that. You can sue me. You can sue me for slander. You can sue. I mean, I'm not going to jail for that, but you can. There's tort law for that, right?
You're exactly right, Brian. And there's 2. You said recourse, legal recourse, and redress. Folks, look up redress later on your own. That's
part of the First Amendment. Yeah.
Huge, important standards. But let me take you just a little bit off center, because what you're talking about now, I love it, is talking about lying, knowingly lying to get something. Okay, which is different than accidentally creating a falsehood, and it's different than intentionally using fighting words. Now, fighting words, stop for a minute. Don't get in a box. Don't go into that individual ice cube tray. Remember, the whole tray gets filled at the same time. What I'm saying is there was a girl, and I believe it was in Texas, but it might have been Oklahoma, and who gives a shit, that talked the boy that kept saying that he had suicidal feelings. She legally, the standard said that she was guilty. So she talked that boy into committing
killing
suicide.
himself. I remember that one. I
completely forgot
that, before.
Right?
Yeah.
So because she was convicted, we can talk about it, because she was convicted, the court found that her words caused that death. So you see what I'm saying about approximate cause, Brian? You see what I'm saying about a link? It took them a while, but they established a link that said her words so demeaned this person. And somebody right now is listening and saying, hey, I heard about that little kid that got bullied at school, that committed suicide. Brian, those words are the same words that we're talking about. So I would say the category is parallel and thinly, like an onion layer, that we're talking about speech that that's lies, that is likely to incentivize people to do something bad, and directed speech that doesn't have to be lies. It just has to be so influential that a person like that young kid went and committed suicide, right? Let's keep that in the same ball.
Okay, that absolutely. But you brought up with that case of the girl who influenced that kid to commit suicide. You brought up the specific term that it fell under. She was the proximate cause.
Yes,
so, but he likely had other contributing.
Oh yeah, of course,
right,
of course.
So that's an important distinction too, because there's all kinds of contributing factors. So let's say I am angry at the new, sandwich at Wendy's, and I'm so angry that I'm going to go attack a Wendy's. Well, there's a lot of contributing factors to that. So meaning, obviously, I probably have some sort of mental health issue, right? If I'm that angry. 2, I have maybe I've been bullied my whole life, and I feel like I've done nothing. 3, I was indoctrinated to hate fried chicken sandwiches since I was at birth. I've got all these things boiling up.
That morning you were assaulted by that guy dressed as a chicken, flipping the sign.
Right. It's
we call that the Family Guy defense.
The Family Guy, the chicken fight scene. And then you know what? I see on the news that Wendy's came out with a new chicken sandwich, and I go in there and shoot up the Wendy's. That was the the proximate cause right there of me going and doing that. Well, at one, it's a ridiculous situation, right? But that's the point to show this stuff, that there's a lot of other contributing factors. Some attorney would have to make the link saying, yeah, but because you released that chicken sandwich, you led to the death of these employees because my client, now this is a ridiculous legal argument.
And they say, for that. Yes. That's what they'll say in court. But for that instant,
So this is where
exactly.
on news stations, blogs, the internet,
Yep.
social media, where things get a little complex because many of the things that people watch and consume, the information they consume, can become a contributing factor to them
Yeah.
acting out in some sort of way. And
Yep.
it could be a major contributing factor. Now, the problem is there's all kinds of contributing factors. So an attorney can say, well, yeah, but uh, a news anchor could be on spouting off something that's complete lies and BS. And then someone could take that information and they go act on it. And then an attorney's going to say, well, but because of this host said this,
Exactly.
that my client went and did this, and this is why, and now this is a proximate
Yep.
cause of it, which is that was one of the cases of remember the Fox News case where they said a judge ruled someone sued Fox News and Tucker Carlson, and the judge said no reasonable human being would believe that this is anything other than, I forget the term they use, but it not they didn't say parody. They said it's something about like
entertainment, right?
Yeah, they said entertainment, but I forget what the actual term
Sure.
was. Is that no reasonable person would believe that it was exaggeration and non-literal commentary, which is an interesting term,
Okay.
non-literal commentary, because a lot of speech could fall under that. That's just making a joke or something too, right? Is non-literal
Yep.
commentary. So there's ways around this stuff now, but on the other
So
end, they got another lawsuit because he said a bunch of stuff about some voting machines, and now a judge said, yeah, you can't say that. That's libel, that's slanderous, that's definitely like that part. You can now, although not a criminal act, you fall under tort law, and someone can sue you for doing that.
precisely, civilly. So let's not mistake news for news. So
Yeah,
when we see something that says CNN or Fox
yeah,
News,
I put them all in the
the
same
end,
bucket. I don't care which
it's
one it is.
entertainment,
Right.
and you either
At
like
this
it or
point,
you hate it.
yeah.
Let's go back to Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton's got caught up
Yep.
in a scrum, and Hillary Clinton looked straight at the camera. Yeah, but if the one in Europe, she looked straight at the camera and said, "I agree that it was a willful misrepresentation of the truth." Okay, that's one of the. Every once in a while, when I catch Shelley in a white lie, she looks at me and she looks straight in my face and says, "Greg, that was a willful misrepresentation of the truth." So
that was the one about her like dodging sniper fire in
and the
Kosovo
grenade came rolling in, and she
like it
rolled it
was
off
just
the
a
stage,
junk
right?
story, and that was the same as the
So
Brian Williams, right? The news
yeah,
reporter
yeah,
who
exactly.
got
And you know what? They were
taking
close enough.
RPGs. Yeah,
We all do that, though. Listen, there's a thing in psychology, and I can't think of it right now because I'm a bad human and I'm sick as shit. But when somebody plagiarizes, the difference between plagiarism and this psychological standard is intent. So
right.
sometimes you read something or see a film or a commercial or something, you're so inspired by it that a year later you're laying in bed and all of a sudden you sit up and you go, "Eureka, I found it." And I'll give you an example. The two words Anne Frank and Frankenstein came up in my head one day, and I go, "Man, Anne Frankenstein, wow, that would be a great thing." And Shelley goes, "Man, you should write that down." And we looked it up, and it's everywhere. Anne Frankenstein is a series of books and comics. So you think, though, in your mind, you go, "Hey, how clever am I?"
Yeah,
do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And so
you maybe read that somewhere
plagiarism.
10 years ago,
yes.
and that popped in your head. Yeah.
But psychologically, there's a term for that. With biases, there's probably 100 terms for it. But the idea is that, Brian, intentionally going, "Hey, I'm going to take that idea and run with it on my own," that's illegal. Okay. So those type of connections and words are bad as well. So when you saw Brian Williams, or when you see the news do that, sometimes they're misrepresenting themselves incidentally. And what I mean by that is they had this amazing emotional experience and they conflated other experiences around it to create one dream. Why? Because we're the center actors in our lives. And guess what? Nothing fucks up a story better than witnesses.
Yeah, there's another witness. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got to walk all your comments back. Sorry for my language, folks, but we've all been there. We've all done the fish story.
Nothing ruins a good story like another witness. But
you got it.
And that's but that's psychologically over time.
Involved in a caper, right?
Okay. Yeah. Here's the problem. Malcolm Gladwell uses that literally and says, "Well, let's not." Gosh. Yeah. He literally says, "Well, the facts aren't as important as the story." It's like, well,
but Brian, historical.
You're not writing a novel, though, right?
Historical president Plato said that one time. Do you remember? So the idea
that's
is
a news thing. You can go back to the Romans, and you can either go to the reading wall and find out what the Senate posted for the news for the day. But you know what was more popular? hey, you got to go hear my friend Greg talk about it. He's going to come over for dinner and he's going to tell you what the news. So the
That's the key.
commentary on it was always
Yep.
more popular. It goes all the
Yeah.
way back thousands of years. So that's why the news
And
is how it is.
it's the telephone game too, because
Yeah.
remember the runner that was coming with the news. A lot of times the runner had to adjust the facts of the caper, because what happened to a lot of those news runners,
Yeah,
Brian?
kind of.
They were murdered when it was bad news. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
So it didn't take long for them to go, yeah, you might want to soften that a little bit, you know?
yeah,
So
exactly.
I totally get it. So hey, I want to throw in one. I'd like to go back and talk about how influential teachers can be, but I'd also like to throw in the dystopian Orwellian Ministry of Truth. So
Yeah, and
the idea is, folks, the one comment, Brian, specifically, is when they were talking about this disinformation governance board and
it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
But DHS, we love you. We still want to work with you. But listen, this is one of those. Listen to this quote, though, Brian.
Yeah.
This is one that falls short. Okay. This means, okay, that the words of someone voicing an opinion that others do not agree with could be considered just as much an act of violence as the actual violence itself. That's a quote, Brian. Here's my worry. Here's my worry.
Yeah.
We already have enough laws on the books.
Yeah.
When calm heads prevail, where's the right arena to address these situations? That's in a court of law, Brian.
Well,
either on the criminal side or the civil side, but it's in a court of law, not at 30,000 feet, you know, not by jumping up on the stage, not by fleeing the cop at a traffic stop. That's just my point on that, is to make sure we do address that, because we're, you know, I get emails every day. What do you think about
it? It's so I understand people are trying to figure out, well, hey, there's a lot of bad info out there. You got to sift through it. So what is the historical precedent for that? Well, there's been a lot of bad info out there for a really long fucking time, and I think we've done pretty well. So since the first human spoke to another human, you know, things have been gets a little murky sometimes. Brian. So I don't like it, because that could eventually be used as a tool. That could be used as a weapon. And so
I want to be laser focused on this. The whole idea behind the Disinformation Governance Board was when they were interviewing or interrogating subjects at our nation's borders, the DHS would be able to leak that information virtually immediately, so that anybody that needed that information, like it was hey, listen, they're planning a coup, or there's an ambush plan, or this or that. That was the whole idea behind it, is they could take that what could have been classified information and get it through the system more quickly to people that need it, right? Here's the problem with that, Brian. I just want to make sure that we briefly touch on that. You remember Don Yeager, great dear friend Don Yeager. So Don Yeager went to wherever the area is, and I can't think of it. So if you go east of Lubbock and south of gosh damn Albuquerque, west of Albuquerque, there's an area of the Four Corners there, but to the right, where they found different tools. And Yeager would go back down there with his good friend Ted Turner and some other people and dig. And Yeager sent me photos, Brian, and there was photos of some dinosaur that had walked in the riverbed in the mud. And then there was a disruption where the two pieces of earth pushed up this way, and now this slab fell down. So you imagine, folks that aren't watching me, upheaval of earth, and one of the slabs of earth fell down. So on that slab, the footprints were on a 90-degree angle to the ground. And on a slab found a little further down, because it was hanging, there was a footprint above. So you know what they created? They created that village's dragon. Right. It could violate the laws of gravity, and even though it was this heavy, it did all that other stuff. That's what I'm afraid of when we get a disinformation thing. Listen, disinformation is healthy. It's healthy when it's discovered and brought out into the clear light of day, and we find out that it was a lie. So I think that actually doesn't violate freedom of speech, and actually emboldens our laws that protect the freedom of speech. I just want to, because it's a common question we get.
And I'm obviously an ardent supporter of the First Amendment of the Constitution. I firmly believe you should be able to say whatever you want, so long as it doesn't fall within what the legal standard already is and what it meets. So if it's not libelous, if it's not inflammatory, if it's not considered incitement, fighting words, those are all established and can be figured out. And when there's gray areas or people aren't sure, guess what? It becomes case law and it goes through the courts, and that's fine. I think it's just fine. You anytime you stifle, oh, we can't let people say that because that might be taken the wrong way. Oh, well, you know what I mean? That's great. That could happen. You don't
Get
and
thicker skin.
well, and here's the issue of all this stuff, and I've seen it time and time and time and time again. I don't you go back through history is oftentimes when someone in a leadership or powerful position either withholds information, doesn't give the full picture, or blatantly lies, wherever it falls in there, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, that act is when it's done because someone thinks that they're doing the right thing, meaning, you know what, we better keep this from people because we don't want them to do X, Y,
Yep.
and Z.
Yep.
Anytime that has happened, once it's found out, the result of what happens is far worse than what they were trying to withhold.
Absolutely, so
It's
harmful.
always so much worse. The cover up in any of these conspiracies or scandals is always worse, well, typically worse than what happened, right? I mean, it's like you created this whole nonsense thing because you were trying to cover up or not let people find out about this thing over here, but this thing over here is nowhere near as bad as what happened from your actions. And that's the big
Right.
problem is like, I think people are, I don't know, everyone's talking about there's less truth out there. I would say it's a complete opposite. What Twitter
There's
allows
so
is
much truth
you can't
that you're overwhelmed.
think about our podcast, Greg. We can't hide. If anyone wants to know about what we really think and what we really do and what our thoughts, feeling, you could sit here with a bunch of experts and analyze us, and they would get us dead on. Why? Because this is our 164th episode, which means at a minimum we have 164 hours of you and I talking, just openly talking. Well, here's what happens when you do that. You can't hide. If you're putting on an act, if you're lying, if you're full of shit, somewhere in there you're gonna go, oh, wait a minute, this is fucking bullshit right now.
Let's go back to episode 107.
You can't keep that up. You can't keep that up. You can keep it up over 1, you can keep it up through 10, maybe 20. But over time what happens is you become more honest. And that's what Twitter is too. It's because it's an immediate reaction. Now people have a bad reaction to words now. And here's my thing where it goes back to the courts and testimony and legal precedent, Greg. Part of the reason why people get so upset when they read something on social media is because people are saying things that you typically have in conversations. So in the context of a conversation, Greg, we might say something that might be a little inappropriate or whatever, make a joke, or even if it's not that. But from your experience, what happens when that conversation gets read aloud in court in a very dry atmosphere? Well, it takes on a whole different meaning. You're like, oh my God, whoa, we didn't really mean it that way. Hang on. So when you're reading something that someone would typically only say, because you're willing to say more on social media in the anonymity and into the void than you are face to face with a person, you would some of the things that people comment on, you'd never say that to the person if they were standing in front of you.
Precisely. So the anonymity and isolation.
But here's the thing. Now you read that and you go, you're putting yourself in the presence of having a conversation with that individual, so you're offended by it, when it's like people can say what they want. My problem is when it jumps to the point of what did you do and what is your intent, but what did you actually do? And intent matters, and that's my big thing about social media and all that stuff is, what is your intent behind this post? What is your intent behind this comment? And how many times people on here heard me say, when you're reading through that stuff, go, what is this person's likely intent? What do you think they meant by it? Not how you're taking it. And I think that helps us understand things a little bit better. And whether that's a speech, whether that's a joke, or you know what I mean?
Let me go back one step. Yeah, I love that, by the way. The intimate violent reaction. Listen to me. You said something that we don't want to walk away from, for all the coppers in the audience, anybody in a legal profession. Or if you're working, for example, at a school as a teacher.
Yeah, if you fall under
when people make statements to impeach a person's statement, you first have to pin them to a statement. So the reason that you make a person make a statement or do a witness statement or write a report is because your memory does not get better over time. Now, the way to do that in criminalistics is you ask a person, and when was that? Okay. And then you got out of the car. Yeah, I got out of the car. Well, take me from there. And now you get the person's story, Brian. Then outside the room, the investigation is occurring, and they come back and they go, that's impossible. This guy was here. The car was never there. We have a camera of this. You see what I'm trying to say? So the idea is, your point is well taken about how many episodes we have, because a person could impeach our testimony by going back and saying, hey, this. There aren't two sides of your mouth. The only person that knows there's two sides of your mouth is a dentist they can testify to that legally. Every one of us, if you say something and then counteract it or countermand it, then I want to know why. Unless you find new science or evidence, Brian,
Yeah.
and it changes
Yeah.
your opinion.
You update
Then
your
be
opinion.
transparent. You
That's yeah.
update your opinion. And a scientist or a good human will update their opinion set.
And
right?
we've done that with different topics where then
Of course
someone
we
says,
have.
"Hey, did you know that this occurs?" And we went, "Oh my God, no, I didn't." Oh, now knowing that, I wouldn't have
Knowing
made
what I
that.
know
Yeah,
now.
knowing what we know now.
Exactly.
No,
That's
and
such a great thing.
but that's an important distinction. And
Yep.
I have a huge tolerance for what I would that a tolerance for what upsets me, meaning I let people say whatever. I'm all good with it. It's what you do and what you mean by it, right?
Yep.
Because I'm like, people go, "Wow, that comment doesn't offend you, or that doesn't annoy you." I'm like, no, it really doesn't, because that person just wants to have their say. You know what? Let them
Yep.
cool off. Let them come down from a little bit. Let them de-escalate themselves by getting that all out.
Exactly.
And then I go, okay.
Because if
And
you're
you
not
see,
in control of
well,
you,
you see me do the okay, go on, and
yep,
just deadpan. Okay, please tell me more about that. Oh wow, why did it make you feel that way? And then they end up working themselves out of the situation sometimes, unless they
you
don't.
got it.
Then I know, okay, this is different. This person wants to have their way, not just their say.
And I may have to improve my defensive posture, or I may have to walk away to further de-escalate, or I may be dealing with somebody that's got mental health issues.
Yeah.
Brian, that's how you establish your baseline. So you
So
did is through the rock and the pond. Great
yeah,
point.
so now that we're 45 minutes into the episode, so the only people listening now are the people who really enjoy it.
Right.
There is a lot of talk right now, Greg. A lot of people commenting, especially when it comes to law enforcement and
Yep.
criminal justice system and anything law enforcement related in our country and how we handle this stuff. One, let me caveat this. I hate that we have to fucking caveat everything, but reform is constant and necessary, and we always need to adapt and get better at how we prosecute, treat criminals, police. That it's just I look at that ball's always in motion, right? It should always be in motion as things move. Doesn't mean we make rapid changes. We take what we know works and we build upon that, and then we get rid of stuff that we know isn't working. But there's even university professors, there's entire industries coming out saying, law enforcement is inherently criminal, it's inherently evil, it's inherently bad. Yep. We're going to defund the police. The police are the problem. So now, has that led, because there's, even the FBI came out, the director of the fucking FBI came out and said, what we're not talking about is that police officers are being murdered at a higher rate than we've ever seen before. And he was very clear when he used the term murder, right? That's
Did
a
not
clear
accidentally
legal
use that word.
Yep, that was not an accident, and said, hey, this is what's happening.
Totally
so
agree.
all this talk now, you could make the argument that because of all this talk that's out there, because of these big talking heads and these people that make a lot of money off their grift of selling this junk, saying, that's causing some of these things to happen. Meaning criminals are feeling more emboldened, knowing they're not likely going to get in trouble. Now they know if they kill a cop, they will. But meaning even just basic level of crime, different types of theft and burglaries and carjackings and all that stuff. They're going, well, they're not really coming after us right now, and everyone thinks that the cops are evil, so this is going to lead to an increase of crime. Here's the thing: it's hard to make that statement, over a 1 month period. Hard over a 6 month period. When we get a year,
hard over
when you get 2 years, when you get 3 years, when you get 5 years of comparative data and compare how the narrative has changed,
totally agree,
what's
Brian.
actually happening on the ground. Well, now you have something. It sucks because you have to look at it. What did we say when a lot of this stuff started happening? Well, is it a blip on the radar, or is this going to be a trend? Well, what's happened over the last couple of years? It's a fucking trend now. So this whole discussion kind of started when you sent me an article, which I didn't even read the article because I saw the face on it and knew exactly who he was and what he does. And I said, look, it's a grift. He said, yeah, but look, he went on the news and he does interviews. And here's an article saying that police are inherently evil. They're bad for society. They're this. That will cause someone to go and attack a cop. And you said this shouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. And I said, well, hang on, he's making generalizations. I don't agree with his message, but he's not calling on a specific person. And then you again said, yes, but someone could make the case, a lawyer could make the case saying, this is what he's doing, this is what it led to. So that's kind of where this discussion started.
Yep.
And I think it's an important discussion because, and it goes back to what I brought up a little bit earlier about what is your responsibility, what level of responsibility you have when making comments. When you have an audience, you have a level of responsibility. Whether you choose to accept that level of responsibility or not is on you, but you have a responsibility. I don't care if you're a social media influencer peddling
Yes.
some new product, right, that you're trying to sell and make money off of, right? You
Yeah.
have a responsibility to those people. Now, legally, you might not. I think morally and ethically you do, but that's dependent on the individual.
Well, let's talk about legal then. Let's talk about legal for a second. So using laws to regulate lies doesn't implicitly violate freedom of speech.
Right.
And what we have is a Boston professor that is making what is obviously lies and saying statements that aren't factual, and those might influence a decision. Now, let's look at the law very briefly and say that, okay, perjury, and by the way, perjury is under oath, folks, but the idea is that we understand that perjury is illegal because it predictably can affect the outcome of a jury's decision, right? So they make it illegal. You're under oath. You knew, or you should have knew better, Brian, and you're going to jail. Now, so let's tweak it a little bit, and let's talk about obstruction of justice. And this is the standard that I think we meet. And this is why, folks. So if you're a federal law enforcement officer, not going to apply to state and local yet, okay? But if you're federally protected under the law, then federal law says it's contrary. If you knowingly and willfully make any materially false or fictitious or fraudulent statement or representation in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch, and federal officers are under the executive branch, okay, that you have done an illegal act. Why? Because what you're doing is you're either hindering or obstructing the flow of justice, and you're affecting, again, the outcomes of certain situations. So if I can draw a line that said that your Boston professor made statements that all cops are evil, on the take, racist, and are going to beat you to death, and that influenced you to flee from the scene, and subsequently you're fleeing, you ran a red light and killed a family on the way to church, Brian, I would say you're the proximate cause. Your words incited my lawless action. And Brian, I don't think it's as much of a stretch. And that's all I wanted you to see is that, look, words have to, look, I'm not talking about being in the old standard, being in a theater and yelling fire.
Okay.
And then somebody breaks a leg.
We should have brought that up even earlier, because
can you imagine?
But what happened with that one is that the Supreme Court justice, I forget his name, when he wrote that example in his opinion about imminent lawless action and what incitement is, he later, not long after, immediately regretted it, because he's like, that's the worst example. And then every asshole I see
could have ever given.
every asshole on social media still continues to use that, like, yeah, but you can't yell fire in a crowd, like, and it's the worst, and it's still
because
standing
it's the
down
lowest standard.
But you can go look, and that justice says that's the worst example to ever give about anything. But anyway, I'm sorry.
But you get it. My point here is that free speech doesn't cover, like for example, pedophilia is in wide criminal statutes, legal standards, all that other stuff. So if we start talking about certain things under support of pedophiles, that's illegal. We can't do that. Yet not long ago in Congress, NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, was in the aisles trying to get congressmen to lower the ages of consent. So Brian, I'm telling you that there's always a duplicitous standard, and that's what the law tries to wade through. But the idea, because the whole idea behind having two sides and having two groups of experts and attorneys is because nothing is clear. You see what I'm saying? So I'm saying Will Smith clearly knew he was getting angry, and he clearly willfully and knowingly walked up on the stage and assaulted another human being. Then he went back to his seat, still angry, and heckled and harangued him. And that wasn't a comedy club. And so I'm saying that the right jury or the right judge at the right time we'll look at that behavior, Brian, and
Well,
say
that
it's unwarranted
no,
and it's illegal.
that's clear. That's clearly illegal.
Yeah,
Whether
yeah.
anything's done about it or not, that's a
That,
different
but
a
that's
different
not up to
story.
us, is it?
It's a clear violation of the law. But you
Yep.
brought up an important term, but it goes back to, I think it goes back to, the university professor example. You said you knew or should have known.
Yes, sir.
So this is a different standard. If, I'm sitting in an empty park and I read that professor's comments out loud for all to hear and no one hears me and I'm no one, that's a little bit different. When I have a national level audience, when I'm a professor at a well-known university, I am charging a significant amount of money for people to come and hear me talk. So I'm a professional.
Yep.
I'm seen in this area of thought and study as one of the preeminent leaders in this field. Do you have a duty? Do you have a responsibility? What is it? Because someone could say, if there were a case where someone went out and then assaulted a police officer after walked out of him talking,
I'm serious,
at giving a speech, and then they walked out and punched a police officer in the face, could you say that what his speech was incitement? Well, in that specific case, yes, I think you could make that argument. You could easily make that argument, and you could say that he's responsible because he knew or should have known what he was saying was likely to cause, not only because of his education, because of his area of expertise, because of what he does, because of his notoriety, you are held to a different standard than the homeless guy with mental health issues in the park. It's two completely different things.
Exactly. And so, I think that sums up our argument. And it might not be criminal prima facie, but it may be tort law. Very easy.
I think so.
And with the right lawyer at the right time and the right Supreme Court or a circuit court judge, rather, I think that you could make a case and actually bring him before the court and have a good argument. Brian, I don't know what the outcome of that one would be, but I'd watch it. I'd tune in.
Well, that's why it goes. Oh yeah, that's why it goes back to the knew or should have known. Like if you're this person, you're this well educated, and you understand these things. Well, guess what? You now knew or should have known that what you're doing is going to cause this type of behavior, and that's a huge important distinction.
Brian, let me add a Greg quote. Just wrote it down and actually wrote down the date. The worst laws are written and enforced during times of war. You know that, and I know that. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, we can go back to draft law. We can go back to insurrection. We can go back to people being executed for something that, had there not been a war on, would have never been brought up.
The
Patriot clothes
Act
they wear.
Is the yeah.
Think about it. Patriot Act is right up in our nose and doesn't pass the smell test in many respects. So what? So what I'm saying is, right now it appears as though we have a nation at war with its police. Wait a minute. If I started my opening argument to the jury with that, Brian, and then I followed up with the worst laws are written and enforced during this, I'd have that Boston legal professor, I'd have him on the ropes. I'm telling you right now. And folks, if you're listening, I'm telling you, all I got to do is draw the line connecting the fiber and then have them duke it out. That's it.
Well, as an argument's sake, I'm sure you could, depending on the jury and the circumstances, can make that argument in court, and I'll get them on board to agree with you. But this is when when people say this is a war on whatever, or it's a war on this, or it's a war, it's like, I don't know, man. I've fucking been to war. I've seen a lot of that. People yelling at each other is not war. It's actually a really good thing.
No, but I'm talking killing cops, Brian.
Right.
Ambushes, and you know what? It looked a lot like war when I saw the dead bodies. So
I get what you're saying, but you're to take smaller incidents and then try to show it as an overarching trend. I mean, that's tough to do.
5 years of examples,
right?
It's not that hard.
I agree.
I'm telling you, Brian.
I would definitely tune into that.
I would too. And this is one of the times where we are in disagreement only based on the fact of predicting people's likelihood to get behind an issue. And I'm telling you right now, the nation would get behind it. I'm not saying it's right, Brian.
No.
The nation would get behind it, and it would be a great scrum in court.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm saying, is there enough artifacts and evidence to support a reasonable conclusion? Is
Right.
there enough there? And if a jury in a court says there is, then there is, and it's precedent. And like, okay, I'm on board with it. You get what I'm saying?
Right. But I'm
Uh,
saying that we declared a war on drugs, Brian, that
I know,
lasted 25 years and it
but it's
wasn't a war. Right.
still going. I know a lot of people died in that war.
Yeah, but let me tell you this. If I approached it with that and I used words, the whole center of our conversation, I bet
Mm-hmm.
I could get enough people to lean in. Do you get what I'm saying? The United States being as divisive as they are now about certain issues and everything, you bring that up and run it up the flagpole. And Brian, it might only last a week, the fervor around the argument, but an argument could be made that there's a war on the U.S.
Yeah,
Constitution. There's
yeah,
a
sure.
war on the Supreme Court. I'm
No, no,
just using words
you're
against.
right. You're right. No, and I will acquiesce that you can. Yes, you could say that and show that. My thing would be, yeah, but when has there not been that? Like
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying I'm being
yeah.
that I'm
Oh
being
no.
that sleazy lawyer, Brian.
Oh well,
Right?
and I would come in and go, yeah, you're absolutely right. So
Right.
the precedent is since the Constitution was ratified, there's been a war on the Constitution. So what makes this any different
Exactly.
than 200 years ago?
And we wouldn't have border security if there wasn't a war on the security of the United States.
Yeah,
That's the argument I'm making. I'm using.
Yeah, no, you're
Brian,
all
I'm doing the Ben and Jerry's vanilla is the most important flavor, right? Why? Because if you can do vanilla right, everything else is right. And what I'm trying to be is a little bit poking fun at our use of words with fighting words.
Of course.
I think we're just flipping it on its ear,
absolutely.
just to make people think, my dear friend.
No, I definitely agree with that. And there's certain, I know we've talked about it before in the past, but one, obviously we say words matter.
Words
We
matter,
always
buddy.
care more about behavior, but your words absolutely influence behavior. And I always go back, just like I brought up before, is what is your intent? Like my takeaway is like, if you're going to post something on social media, what is your intent behind it? You want to show yourself in a cool car or something at the beach with your friends because you're having fun? That sounds normal. That sounds reasonable. What are you trying to do? Like, what is your comment? What good is it doing? Does it add value to the conversation? What is your intent with that comment? Because again, it goes back to the criticism. Someone says, well, I don't think this. And they're just like, you clearly can tell from their comment, they're some jackass who's just saying stupid shit. But what does everyone do? We want to pile on. Well, you don't, and it becomes this whole spiral out of control. And it leads me back to what I've thought about all of these social media companies, where I said, all right, what if I was Mark Zuckerberg, or it used to be Jack Dorsey who runs Twitter, now it's Elon, all these guys. What if you were running one of these platforms? You know what I fucking couldn't stand having to deal with? People complaining about people getting of all the divisive and speech on there, and all the interactions between people, and why aren't you limiting this, and why they shouldn't be allowed to say that. I would hate having to deal with that. So I guarantee all of this shit that they have to deal with gets in the way of them making money. I know, I understand that people will say, well, the algorithms are designed to get you to argue against each other. It's kind of not really. It's just designed to give you information that you keep looking for. Oh, you're looking for this? Here's some more of it. Oh, you're looking for this?
Right.
Well, that's, you can kind of get radicalized in a way because you're just in this echo chamber. But the idea is, I can imagine them just being like, I wish fucking people would stop being such assholes so I could run this business. But I think that's what it would be. I don't know though.
It's a lofty goal, buddy.
I don't know. I doubt. I'm ever going to be running some sort of a social media organization. I don't.
Folks, Brian is pre-Musk, just so you know.
Pre-Musk.
That's so true.
That means.
Okay, you know what my closing words are, Brian? My closing words for this episode are that, just like you knew or should have known, I would add that the words you don't say are as powerful as the words that you do. And if you don't speak up and you don't speak out, then sit in a corner and color, because you're not having your opinion known. Look, you can intervene and stop a terrorist act. You can intervene and stop an act of domestic violence, or kidnapping, or any of those other things. I'm just saying, man, what you say matters, and what you don't say matters. I just want to keep everybody in that groove too.
That's a good point. I will echo the "you knew or should have known" is an important phrase to understand, and contemplate your past actions in life under that knew or should have known. I can look back to me doing a lot of stupid stuff when I was a kid, especially involving
Well,
alcohol.
nobody
Like, I
told you that when you were a kid.
probably should have known that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I wasn't as a kid, maybe in my 20s, where it's like, I probably should have known that was going to go catastrophically bad. I really should have at that point, it's a good thing for personal. And then, like you said, is responsibility, intent.
Yes, sir.
And most people do want their say, not their way, but words absolutely matter. I think a better understanding of just the First Amendment of the Constitution. You can go, there's so many great sites. I'll put some links in the episode that explain, hey, this is what the Supreme Court says this is what incitement means per the Supreme Court. This is what imminent lawless action looks like. Here's some examples. Here's some case law, because it's a good comparative. Because then it's very simple. Here's what happened. You just compare the new thing on that and go, you know what? These really aren't the same at all. So, or you know what? This is exactly the same. So I think that's a good one. And we're big proponents of the First Amendment. Obviously, we're on a podcast, so we're all about free speech.
I've got the Constitution on the driver's seat visor of my truck, Brian. It's been there since every truck I've had. So
yeah,
it's a good document. Everyone to sit by the side of the road and take a minute while you're waiting for your food or something. It's a great thing. Break in there. There's a lot of thought that went into that, and it's been around a good long time. And as my dear friend Brian says, ideas that stick around are generally ones we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, good ideas stick around. Well, on that, I think we'll end for today. Thanks everyone.
You know where I'm going.
In. Yeah, and then
I got to visit Pompeii.
We've got more on the Patreon side, so please check that out. If you enjoy the podcast, just share it with your friends, tell people about it. It helps us out a lot, and then we can even do more and increase production value and get someone else to do the editing and all that stuff. So just tell your friends about it, and don't forget that training changes behavior.